the Midwest Solars Podcast.
Information to make informed decisions on converting to solar power.
With expert guests in the solar business. Learn more at MidwestSolars.com.
Here is your host, Tom Wingert.
All right, welcome. This is the Midwest Solar's initial podcast. This is an exciting day for us. We've been doing this in Wisconsin now for 3 years. We are solar professionals and renewable energy experts. This podcast is specifically focused on increasing the availability of solar and renewable energy across the nation and the world. We're primarily focusing this initial podcast on agribusiness in rural America. The United States Department of Agriculture has grants available for people who want to go solar or want to get into renewable energy. We'll give you a couple examples throughout the podcast, but we want to make this an informative scenario so that the customers can learn about what's available, what incentives are available for you, the consumer, in solar. So Midwest Solars in Mondovi, Wisconsin at 910 Countryside Parkway has been doing this for 3 years. I have a partner, Dr. Andy Van Roo Dr. Andy Van Roo from Andrew Van Roo Chiropractic. We're at 910 Countryside Parkway in Mondovi. We've been there a couple of years, and we've put up dozens and dozens of systems in the western Wisconsin area, and we have 100% customer satisfaction. Why are the customers satisfied with solar? Well, number one, it works. Number two, the payoff is unbelievable over time. These systems are manufacturer warranted for 25 years. And they'll work for 100 years, but after 25 years, we'll probably want to change them out. So a little bit of background on me. I'm a local Wisconsin guy, graduated from Stout, which is in Menominee, Wisconsin. And I went out and made a lot of headway in the telecommunications world. I'm a technology guy. So about 8 years back, we bought our first solar company in Central Florida, and it was a disaster. We didn't know what we were doing. I looked at my partner and we said, well, one of us needs to know what we're doing here. So I went to work for Tesla Energy. This is back around 2017. So in my time with Tesla Energy, we got way ahead of this game. We understood what was going on. We worked with the best people. We got the best training and set us up for a lot of success. Went back into the solar thing, bam, here comes the pandemic. The way we sell solar is face-to-face. We actually come out and explain the product to the consumer, and we spend time with you one-on-one. All of a sudden, we can't talk to anybody. So I go to work for Amazon. I get a bunch of promotions. I worked there for a year. We learned how to scale a business when we worked for Amazon, and we know how to take things and make them work in a large fashion. So this really set us up to do well. 2019, we start the business with Andy in Mondovi, and the rest is history. We've identified a need, and it's a rural need, and a program that's available from the United States government to get up to 50% of the cost of these systems in the form of a REAP grant. And we've brought on a subject matter expert. His name is Kellen Gracie, and he works for Revetta. He is a PhD. He's a very intelligent guy. He works for GoDaddy, and he is our grant writer for this system, and we're excited to have him on board today. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this can work, what's involved in getting one of these grants, what you might be looking at, and I'm going to introduce him right now. Welcome, Kellen.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
So we've been working with Kellen now for about 6 months. They are best in breed in this business, and they're very, and I don't use the term aggressive. They aggressively go after this money. These grants are competitive, so it's really just a checklist. You got to get everything checked off and you get approved. Kellen, give us a little overview on the program and some of your thoughts on it, and I'll ask you some questions, but give me an overview of what this brings to the table for a rural America business or agribusiness.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks again for the time and for having me on.
Glad to have you.
The program really starts with two kind of important check boxes to check off before you get started with anything. First, you have to be the right type of entity. That means you have to be an agricultural producer. The USDA defines an agricultural producer as somebody whose revenues are 50% or more coming from an agricultural source. So you can have multiple streams of revenue, just the majority of it has to come from agricultural operations. Or you can be a small business. And small business is determined by, depending on which industry you're in, your overall annual average revenue or your overall annual average employee headcount. It's different based on which industry you're in, and we look that up and determine what your threshold is based on the information you provide.
So can I ask you a question?
That's the starting point.
I noticed that the definition of what's available is either a rural business or an agribusiness. Can you differentiate the two and tell us what the option is and what the qualifications difference might be?
Yeah, this is a little confusing for some folks. So you can be a small business of any kind and be in a rural area and qualify. So we've done funeral homes, convenience stores, antique malls, all sorts of different types of operations, a lot of storage unit operations where they have the roof line, they have the property, they have the perfect setup already. Makes a lot of sense to put some solar panels up. So you can just be a small business as long as you're in a rural area. And USDA has some definitions around what a rural area is. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. And then the other part, the agricultural producer part, you could actually be an agricultural producer anywhere. So the rural distinction leaves for the agricultural producer. Doesn't matter where you're located, as long as you're 50% or more of your revenue is coming from an agricultural source, you would qualify. But in that sense, yeah, you do have to be an agricultural producer, and that could be anywhere along the supply chain there. So you could be a meat processing plant. That's a REAP grant app we did last year was for a meat packing plant up in Minnesota.
So
there are a lot of different ways to qualify there.
All right, so that's the qualification. Can you give me just a little laundry list of some of the items that we'll be expecting to get from the consumer to be able to qualify for these, and then give us some tips on how to get the best bang for the buck on this?
Sure. And there's sort of two steps here. First step is figure out qualification. So we had to figure out, are you in the right area? If you're just a small business, are you an agricultural producer? Things we just talked about. The next step beyond that is, okay, now there are a bunch of little things that we need to make sure about your business before we go ahead and put an application together that the USDA is going to ask about. Just by virtue of being a federal agency, there's going to be a lot of checks on, are you delinquent on federal tax debt, or are you in judgment against some sort of federal agency, these kinds of things. So we have a form that we take everybody through, an intake form, basically asking different questions about their business, their annual revenue, what kind of business do you operate, can you describe it to me, and then a checklist of different questions like that. Are you behind on your taxes, or owe back child support, or something like that could become a red flag in the federal system, because all those federal agencies talk to each other. So it's important to understand that as well. But once you come in, you do the intake form, we check all these boxes, make sure you're good to go. Then there's a list of documents that need to be provided, and you can kind of think of this as if you're applying for a loan. The documents are very similar. You're going to be expected to provide tax returns. You have to show proof of property ownership. That's often a property tax bill. Depending on the size of the project, there are also going to be various different documents about the business that are required. So for those really big projects where the project cost exceeds $200,000, those are kind of rare, but they are out there. Those much bigger solar projects, those are going to require some pro forma financial documents, some balance sheet, income statement, your P&Ls, those sorts of things you would get from an accountant. If you're under that $200,000 threshold, though, and your project's much smaller, if you're a agricultural producer, you're a farming operation, you're probably down in the lower two tiers.
So I'm going to stop you right there. We've been doing a few of these.
You don't need those kind of documents. So you don't need an accountant or a profit and loss statement or anything like that if you're just a farmer. Installing a $100,000
right.
system.
Let's take a break right there. I want to talk about a couple things I think are relevant. So we've been going out, we've been talking to some of the farmers. There's really kind of two flavors when you're dealing with farmers in the Wisconsin area, and it's different in different states, but we have publicly regulated utilities, and then we have co-op utilities. The co-ops basically try to cap us at 40 kW, so that system's probably around $140,000 to $150,000. So most of these fit into that under $200,000 opportunity that's in our area. Now, if we go to a publicly regulated utility like Excel or Alliance, these utilities allow us to put up the size of system that is in conjunction with the consumption of the farm. And I've been to these farms where they're milking 4,000 head and they've got a $22,000 power bill. We can create a system that's big enough for them to go ahead and power that entire facility. Now, we're capped out at $1 million on this. Is that it? It's $1 million is the maximum?
That's the top amount they'll award for any one project. And it's a 50% cap as well. So if you're at a $200,000 project, your cap's going to be $100,000.
So if we do a $2 million project, we can get a cap of $1 million on it. That's a lot of solar. And I'm just going to take a step back. Yesterday I watched a short 5-minute reel about how much money it costs to farm. These guys had 1,700 acres of beans and corn. They made $1.1 million in revenues that year. They spent 1.5. I'm a business guy, Kellen, and that doesn't work. So these farmers need something. They need a large cash infusion to help them get through this. And then they need to reduce a variable cost, which is escalating out of control at a speed that's breakneck, and turn this into a fixed cost. And then with these systems, we can get them paid off in around 5 years if they get the grant money, 10 years if they don't. But now you've got 20 years. Imagine 20 years of free power. Imagine what that does for a rural farm. This can be the difference between failure and absolute success. And we're bringing this to our farmers. And honestly, I don't think they understand it yet. And that's why we're here. And, we're a force for good. And I'm excited about it. I think we really are on the right track.
Tom, there's also the possibility for many of these systems where you could oversize them and end up being a net producer. So you're not just zeroing out it kind of depends on your utility company and what kind of power purchase agreements you can enter into, where you live, those sorts of things. But there are even some folks who are taking advantage of these grant programs, installing these systems, eliminating their power bill, and in some cases even generating a little extra income because of the power they're selling back to the
We're in Wisconsin. None of that exists here. But all we have to do is go to the border in Minnesota, and they'll do that. So, and we work Minnesota. And so I think the thing is that you can put up at least 40 kW, and anything that you do over the 40 kW, they'll pay you full retail for it. That's the way it used to be, and I'm pretty sure that still exists. Up to 10 years.
South of the border, too. I think Illinois does a lot of stuff like that, too.
Wisconsin's a little behind on stuff, but we're working on that. And we're working with our legislatures to try to get them to understand the need for these products. And we're just trying to get the farmers some help here, and we're trying to sell systems. I admit that, but that's our job. Our job is to put these systems up, and if we can help the farmer doing it, well, we're going to do it. So that's pretty exciting. what do you see as far as in the future, future regulatory that might come into play that would offer any additional things to this? I know that this is a competitive grant scenario, and maybe we should explain that. Now, I've taken student loans before. I'm sure you have. You've got a PhD, so I know you got some student loan out there. A student loan, you just go in, and if you get approved to be in a college, you get an automatic student loan. Do you ever think that the government would do something like that on these grants where they would not have to be competitive?
You know, I don't know. They did make some significant changes this year. So there were huge revisions to the guidelines and just the overall way the program operated. Prior to March of 2023, it was basically an annual program. You had 2 deadlines through the year, but each deadline was tied to what size your project was. So effectively you had one deadline because your project size wasn't going to change. So you had one deadline each year. Now you have a quarterly funding window. So every 3 months is a new batch of competitions, right? So a new group of competitions. It's all handled state by state as well. So when we submit these grant applications,
let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the 3 or the 4 opportunities. When is the next window that we need to get to?
March, end of March. So we just had one that closed December 31st. We just wrapped up Q4 here. What was that? Last week? Yeah, last week.
Yep, December 31st.
And got all of our Q4 apps in. So now we're starting to ramp up for Q1, and that application deadline it's always the last day of the month of the quarter. So that's going to be March 31st. Well, as far as we're concerned, that's really March 29th, right? Because that 31st is
right on
Sunday.
So there's 4 opportunities throughout the year to do this. Start to finish on a normal application, what kind of timeline do you recommend that we start working on so that we time these effectively and we don't have to be under the gun right on March 31st?
Yeah, this is a common problem from my point of view. Is a lot of people tend to drag their feet, or they'll kind of wait until we get closer to the deadline, and that's generally frowned upon for a lot of different reasons. First is the workload from the grant writer's perspective, right? We're kind of all focus all of our work right there at the last few weeks of the quarter instead of spreading it out. But beyond that, there is a value to the customer for getting their application materials to the USDA well in advance of the deadline date. Just in my experience now, I've been working a couple dozen states now. Each state has their own individual state energy coordinator that we communicate with. We submit the application files to, and we develop a relationship with those people over time. And I've found through those relationships that they're generally very awesome, very nice people who want to help. They want to give you this grant money, and they want to help you as much as they can in your quest to obtain it through these competitions. So that being said, if you submit your application materials earlier in the quarterly deadline period, they're more likely to take a peek at them, come back to you with an email and say, hey, you're missing this form, or hey, can you elaborate on this piece here? It's not quite clear to me what you're trying to say, or whatever it may be. So in these grant applications, they end up being 300, 400, 500 pages long. It's a lot of documents that just get stapled together and sent over. But then there's also a written component that we do where we talk about the project site, the company, how this is beneficial to the company, but also beneficial to the community and all these different things. The quicker you get that stuff to the USDA, the quicker they have a chance to kind of digest that, and the quicker they can say, hey, this project's really interesting to us and we're really interested in funding it, but we need these documents, and you still have time to get them to us because your deadline window hasn't passed. So that's different from if you just submitted it March 29th and then the following week the USDA comes back and says, hey, your thing is incomplete, there's too much missing here. And you have problems there. Now you got to wait till June, till the next deadline before you can submit it. So
very good.
The earlier the better. As far as time commitment though, the heaviest time commitment from the customer's point of view is just grabbing all those documents. It's a hefty list. You got to go dig up tax returns and property tax bills and head count numbers and whatever it may be, whatever type of business circumstance you find yourself in. So it's really you got to think you're going to spend an hour or so digging up documents. You're going to spend an hour or so on phone calls and answering questions, signing documents, that sort of deal. But really the timeline is almost entirely driven by the customer themselves and how quickly they can get their information over to
Right
us.
on. Right on. So how do you get paid?
Yeah, we have different pricing options available. We understand people's flavor for risk is different. This is a competitive grant program, and we're charging people a service fee to write the grant application for them. So there's obviously the possibility there that you pay for the grant application fee and then don't get the grant money, right? So that's a concern for many people. We've developed a pricing system that allows people to judge their level of risk. So we'll happily take the standard kind of upfront service fee it's tiered based on your project size. And then we typically take a percentage on the back end. And then that upfront fee will go down as the percentage on the back end goes up, to a point where on some projects we'll even take zero upfront fee with up to a 5% amount of the grant funds if you're awarded.
So we like that one, by the way, and we think that's a pretty fair, equitable scenario. So if we go out, let's use this is a real world example here on a project that I'm currently working on, and we'll use some nice round numbers. Let's just use a $100,000 project. That's nice, easy math, right? All right, so we go and we apply for it. We can get up to $50,000 with the REAP program. All right. By the way, they still qualify for the 30% tax credit. That's 30% of 100. So we've got a $100,000 project. 30% is paid by the government through the Inflation Reduction Act, or what used to be commonly called the ITC, the ITC discount. Then we can get up to 50% of the 100 from the REAP program. So now we're in for $70,000, and the consumer's cost on that would be $30,000 plus 5% for your $50,000 potential on the REAP grant. So 5 times 5, what? So you'd get paid $2,500 on that. Is that about right?
So yeah, for us, it would all depend on the project nuances. We have to do like residential load analysis if there's a house on the property. There are all sorts of things that we would have to dig out of the intake form. But yeah, so that would be a tier 2 project. We have 3 pricing options. The upfront heavy would be $1,200 with 1.5% on the back end. So that would be 1.5% of the $50,000 that would be coming our way. So that's $750 on top of the $1,200. So the total cost is $1,950, right? Just shy of $2,000.
Okay.
But if you go the option B there, or option C, where there is no upfront fee, you're looking at 5% on the back end. Then you're in that $2,500 range that you're talking about, Tom.
Very appropriate for the kind of money, the kind of effort you're putting in here, Kellen. And we're excited about the program. We've got a lot of flexibility. I'm the CEO of Midwest Solar, so I get to make a lot of the rules. I've got a great partner, Dr. Andy Van Roo. Really a super guy. You couldn't ask for a better partner. All happy customers, but this program really creates revenue in a way that is creative and it's needed. The customers need these products. They need the ability to put these up, and money fuels this process. Money is the key to it. And this is a ready source of revenue to build these projects. One of the biggest problems that we have is we need millions and millions of dollars to really obtain our goals. And to get millions and millions of dollars for a company, and we're 3 years old, is really, really challenging in this business. Now, this USDA program is a ready source of revenue that we can tap into, that we can use the farmers' collateral, their earned credit, and get these systems at very, very low cost. And it makes it easy for us as a company because we don't have to go out and apply for these loans. These farmers have 1,000 acres, 5,000 acres. They're more than happy to make these grants to these farmers. So by working in conjunction with the USDA and Keller and his company, we can do these things. Now, we also want to talk about, just briefly, with the USDA, I know that if they get the grant, they might qualify for a government loan, a guaranteed government loan for this. And I'm wondering if you can give me some color on that.
Yeah. Also through the USDA is the REAP loan program. And actually, you could get a REAP loan without getting the grant. It's just they'll only cover up to 50% with a REAP loan without the grant. But if you do get the REAP grant, they'll add another 25% via a loan if you'd like.
Wow.
Making the only out-of-pocket contribution necessary from the customer the 25%. So they'll get, it's very much like a SBA loan where they're backing the loan. So the loan does go through a private lender, and the interest rate is going to be determined by credit score and whatever the lender is looking to do. But the USDA being able to put their stamp of approval on the paper, very much like the SBA
makes
does,
it a very, very
rate
comfortable loan for a small bank to make a loan on this when they know it's guaranteed by the United States government. And the interest rates are typically a little better. Am I right on this?
Yes, much better. Relative to what you would be looking at if you were just doing your kind of standard commercial loan, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we all have to make the money. I get that, and the banks are no
I would
exception.
also just like to point out, just in terms of the government's sort of commitment to this program, I think we're talking about this on this podcast right now, and there's a lot of interest in this recently, and I think a lot of that has to do with these changes that were made back in March that I alluded to earlier. But this is a 10-year-old program. This program has been going on for a long time. It's survived presidencies of both parties, whatever chaos in Congress is constantly going on. So this isn't going anywhere. REAP's not going anywhere, and they've committed more than $2 billion through the end of fiscal 2024. So that's 3 quarters away from now, because USDA's fiscal year starts October 1. So these next 3 funding cycles are going to be crucial, because these are all going to be the ones that are under these new guidelines, these new rules and regulations. I don't know what happens after October 1. Before March 2023, we didn't know that these new changes were going to come out. They just kind of sprung them on us. So these changes do occur. There could be some dramatic changes that happen after September. So what I'm trying to get at or allude to here is now's the time to take advantage of the program in its current state. I don't know if it's going to get better or if it's going to get worse after September. I don't know if it's going to be easier to get access to those funds or if it's going to be more difficult.
It's a really good point, Kellen. If it's in October, at least we know we're not going to have a presidential election in October, but November, here we go. So I'm hoping there'll be some enhancements. We always hope for the best, right? But I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's a 10-year program and that's been around for a while. It's not going away, but when the money's there, we should go get it, right? And it's there now. Let's go get the money. We're running up on a time limit here on our Zoom call, so I'm going to wrap it up. Did we leave anything out?
I do. There are some really important nuances about each particular project. I kind of wanted to jump in and talk about a little bit, but I don't know that we necessarily need to go into the nitty-gritty details. It almost seems like we should encourage folks to reach out regardless, because there may be something unique about your project that's gonna drive that conversation in a different way. And what I'm really thinking about are, when we're talking about agricultural producers or we're talking about farmers, we're often talking about folks who live where their business is, right? Their home is here, their farming operations are in the backyard, their acreage, whatever it may be. So in that situation, the USDA is very a little tricky to deal with in terms of we have to separate out how much power or electricity is being used by the house versus how much power in electricity is being used by the farming operations. So that's one just key nuance for folks who are interested in learning about this program. A really important starting point is to just go get your electric bills. If you pull your last 12 months of electric bills together and give us a call, we can figure out exactly what you're looking at and how to help you best.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with your organization. You and Keenan are true professionals, and Keenan's got a lot of hustle. I appreciate that. As a young kid, he called me. He got me on a cold call. We're gonna make that guy $1 million, and I love that. And so give them an attaboy for me. And thanks for coming on. Steve, thanks for doing this from WHTL here in Whitehall Studios. And we are Midwest Solars, Mondovi, Wisconsin. Feel free to call us anytime. I'm Tom Wingert. I'm at 321-446-9029. That's my phone number, or MidwestSolars.com.
This has been the Midwest Solars Podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
Learn more at MidwestSolars.com.